welcome to this deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be exploring The Three Laws of Performance by Steve Zaffron and Dave Logan. And what's really interesting about this is it's got a really interesting mix of sources.
I think what's intriguing about the book is that it doesn't fall into the typical self-help
Right.
category.
Yeah.
It's really trying to get at something fundamental about the way we see situations
Okay.
and how that impacts our actions and what we accomplish. So it's not just about working harder, it's about working smarter through understanding these laws of performance.
Okay. The first law states, how individuals perform is a direct result of how situations occur for them. So it's not denying reality, but recognizing the power of perception.
That's right. And there's a very compelling story that they share about Selena McGill and Antoinette Gribb at Lonmin, which is a platinum mining company in South Africa.
Oh, I've heard about this one.
Yeah, so Selena is a community member who has this deep resentment towards white South African women stemming from a traumatic experience she had as a child. And at a company gathering, she actually confronts Antoinette, who is a senior manager, about this prejudice.
Oh, wow. That's got to be a little bit awkward.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very tense situation, but instead of getting defensive, Antoinette acknowledges the pain caused by historical injustices, and she expresses a genuine desire to find resolution.
Huh.
And just through that very simple interaction, Selena's entire perception of Antoinette shifts, and it opens up the possibility of connection where previously there was just anger.
Wow. So in that moment, she was able to kind of rewrite the situation.
Exactly, and this perfectly illustrates that first law.
Okay.
Because Selena's behavior towards Antoinette was a direct result of how she saw her. And by changing that perception, a whole new set of possibilities emerged.
Okay, so it sounds like it wasn't just a one-off interaction. It had a ripple effect.
Exactly. Now, Lonmin at the time was facing some pretty big challenges. There was internal conflict outrage in the surrounding community, and they were financially strained.
So it really looked like the CEO, Brad Mills, was facing what they call a default future of just like perpetual discord and decline.
Right. The workers saw the company as hostile, and this resulted in lower productivity, frequent strikes, and even outbreaks of violence.
Oh, okay.
So Mills realized that they needed a change in the narrative. But incremental tweaks weren't going to be enough. He needed to do something bold.
Right.
Which is where this thing called the Wonder Cop meeting comes into play.
Okay, so this meeting, it sounds almost legendary, brought together this really diverse group, executives, union leaders, community members.
Yeah.
And instead of jumping right into problem solving, they started by just like outlining their shared default future.
So imagine this big display, and it's got all these predictions of escalating strikes, continued violence, the company going bankrupt, and just complete demise. It was this really heavy atmosphere, but it was also a crucial step in acknowledging where they were headed.
Wow.
And then the energy shifted when they went from dissecting problems to declaring a new future.
Okay.
A future based on cooperation instead of confrontation.
So they really turned it around in a way.
Yeah. One of the most interesting parts was when they started to identify what they called the games they played during negotiations.
I'm curious to hear what those were.
Well, management admitted to things like making veiled threats and withholding information, and the unions admitted to resorting to sit-ins and damaging company property.
I mean, that sounds pretty serious.
It was, but as they were sharing all of this, the room erupted in laughter because they saw how absurd it all was and how they were perpetuating the very future they wanted to avoid.
Wow, so it was like this collective realization almost.
Exactly. And this meeting led to a bunch of commitments that had previously seemed impossible. Things like total transparency, mutual respect, a commitment to creating a future where everyone's needs were considered.
So they didn't just talk about it, they actually put it into practice.
They did, and the results were pretty amazing.
I bet.
They achieved record platinum production. Workplace injuries dropped dramatically, and for the first time, they had genuine support from the community.
Wow. So that is truly rewriting the future. Now, I want to talk about the second law, which says performance is a function of language. So is this just about, saying the right things being motivational, or is it deeper than that?
Oh, it goes way beyond that.
Yeah.
This law looks at the impact of unspoken assumptions, the hidden knots in our language that we don't even realize are limiting us. And the book gives a great example with the Polis Group.
What is the Polis Group?
It's a Japanese real estate firm, and they were really struggling after their founder suffered a debilitating stroke.
But what were they saying or maybe not saying that was holding them back?
On the surface, they were brainstorming strategies, restructuring.
Yeah.
But underneath it all, there was this pervasive loop of, I'm doing my best, but other people's agendas are preventing me from succeeding.
So how do they break free from that?
It took some digging.
Okay.
Zaffron and Logan introduced this idea of rackets.
Rackets.
Yeah, rackets are these persistent complaints that actually have hidden payoffs that keep us stuck in unproductive cycles.
So what is a racket exactly?
Well, you can think of it like a broken record in your mind.
Okay.
You know, a complaint that you keep repeating over and over, and it might give you some sort of benefit in the short term, but in the long run, it costs you more than it gives you. For the Paulus group, their racket was all tied to the absence of their founder. It's like, if only he were here, he would fix this, but he's not, so we're doomed to mediocrity.
Wow, that's a heavy racket to carry around. It's no wonder they felt stuck.
Right. And this racket led to a sense of resignation, which prevented them from innovating and stepping up as leaders.
So they needed a way to bring those hidden assumptions to light.
Yeah, and the consultants helped them to do that by facilitating a process where they could identify both their individual and collective rackets and then examine the benefits and the costs.
Okay, so once they decluttered that mental space,
Mm-hmm.
what did they do with that newfound freedom?
Well, this is where the third law comes in. Action is driven by a breakdown of the future.
Okay.
Basically, we are naturally drawn towards a future that we can see and commit to.
So it's not enough to just let go of the old stuff. You have to actively create a new and compelling future for yourself.
That's it. And there's a really powerful story about Malcolm Burns, who is the managing director of BHP New Zealand Steel.
I've heard of him.
Yeah. He was facing a tough situation. The plant was on the verge of closure.
Kind of like Lonmin.
Yeah, but Burns did something remarkable. He stood up in front of his team and he declared with absolute certainty that they were going to fight like hell for a new future for the plant.
Wow.
Not just survival, but a future where it thrived.
So he was like a warrior going into battle.
Exactly. And that conviction was contagious. He empowered his people to rewrite their default future, and within 2 years, they had achieved some incredible results. Safety performance went way up, costs went way down, productivity skyrocketed.
Okay, so that's an example of how powerful language can be in shaping the reality we experience.
And the Polis group also experienced this transformation. After they let go of their rackets, they were able to create a future that went beyond anything their founder had ever envisioned.
Wow.
So instead of passively predicting the future, it's about actively creating it, using language as a tool to shape the reality we want.
So there's a difference between describing the present and actually constructing what could be.
That's right. And they refer to this as future-based language or generative language.
Give me an example.
Well, think about the Declaration of Independence.
Okay.
It wasn't just a description of how things were. It was a bold declaration of a new and independent nation.
I see.
And that declaration created a future that people were willing to fight for and ultimately make real.
Okay, so how do we tap into that power in our own lives? How do we become like those shoguns and confidently declare the future we want?
Well, there's this funny story about a group of Japanese executives who were struggling with this idea. They felt like they didn't have the authority to declare a future.
I can see how that might be a challenge in a very hierarchical culture.
Right. But they were challenged to embody their inner shogun, to speak with focus and purpose, to declare a future as if it was already happening.
And what happened?
The transformation was pretty amazing. They went from hesitant suggestions to bold pronouncements.
Wow.
They realized that they actually had the power to shape their own circumstances.
That's pretty inspiring. And it reminds me of that quote, "The future is not something we enter. The future is something we create."
Right. And this applies to more than just grand visions and corporate turnarounds. It applies to every aspect of our lives, our relationships, our health, our communities.
So we have to get over that fear of who am I to say this?
We all have the ability to declare a future and commit to making it real. And it starts with recognizing that the future isn't fixed. It's a canvas waiting for us to create something amazing.
That's a great image. So how do we go from being passive observers to active architects of our future? What are the steps?
Well, the book outlines a process that starts with completion.
What does that mean?
It means addressing and resolving past issues that might be holding us back.
Okay.
It's like clearing out the clutter before you start a new project.
I like that analogy.
Once you've done that, you can articulate your default future, which is basically the path you're on right now, based on your current perceptions and actions.
Okay, so it's like acknowledging where you're headed if you don't make a change.
Right. And then the question becomes, do I want this default future? If the answer is no, then you can start to explore alternative futures, futures that excite you and address your deepest concerns.
So this is something you can do collaboratively with others, right?
Absolutely. The book emphasizes the importance of involving diverse stakeholders in this process,
Okay.
from employees to community members.
So it's not about dictating a future, it's about co-creating it.
Exactly. And as you start to envision this new future, you can use generative language to bring it to life.
I'm starting to see how these three laws all fit together. It's about transforming our perceptions, eliminating limiting language, and then boldly declaring a new future with commitment.
And as you do that, you're going to encounter resistance, both internal and external.
Right.
And that's where the Shogun comes back in.
So it's about staying true to your vision, even when you face doubt or opposition.
Exactly. It's about speaking with authority and taking decisive action, even if it takes a bit of courage and resilience.
This is a powerful framework for both personal and organizational transformation.
Yeah.
Is there an example of a leader who really embodies all three laws? Someone who went beyond problem solving to actually rewrite the future?
The book talks about Paul Fireman, who is the founder of Reebok.
Good.
He was this visionary entrepreneur who built this incredibly successful company.
Hmm.
But then he stepped back and let professional management take over, and the company started to decline.
It seems like that happens a lot with founders. They have a hard time letting go.
It does. But Fireman saw what was happening, and instead of giving up, he took back control and he set out to restore what he called Reebok's previous purity.
So he understood that it was important to align the company's actions with its core values.
And he didn't do it alone. He embraced the three laws, and he engaged hundreds of employees in a collaborative process to create a new future for Reebok.
That's amazing.
And
So he was able to apply these principles on a huge scale, not just for himself, but for an entire organization.
the results were incredible. Reebok regained its momentum, they developed some groundbreaking products,
Wow.
and they created this renewed sense of passion and dedication among their workforce.
This deep dive has been so insightful.
Yeah.
These three laws of performance are such a powerful framework for understanding and shaping our reality. So before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question.
Oh.
What if we applied these principles not just to work, but to every area of our lives? What if we rewrote the future of our relationships, our health, our communities? What if we all tapped into our inner shogun and declared a future filled with opportunity, meaning, and fulfillment?
That's a great question. It makes you wonder what kind of world we could create if we all took ownership of our future like that.
And the book actually touches on this broader societal impact with the idea of self-led organizations. So we've talked about individuals transforming their futures and companies revitalizing themselves. How does that concept apply to society as a whole?
It's about moving away from traditional top-down control and embracing a more decentralized and participatory approach.
So instead of corporations being driven solely by profit, they would operate with a sense of social responsibility.
Right. The book suggests that organizations can become self-led by aligning their actions with a shared future that benefits all stakeholders, not just shareholders.
That sounds like a pretty radical departure from the way things are now.
It is. It requires a fundamental shift in the way we think about organizations. The book makes this really interesting comparison between corporations and individuals.
Okay, I'm curious to hear about that.
Well, corporations are often seen as these legal entities with rights similar to individuals. But the book suggests that we haven't fully explored that analogy.
What do you mean?
It's about recognizing that just like individuals, organizations have values, aspirations, and a sense of purpose.
And those should guide their actions, not just the bottom line.
Exactly. The book challenges us to envision organizations that operate with integrity, honor their commitments, and contribute to the well-being of society.
That's a beautiful vision. How do we bridge the gap between where we are now and that ideal future?
It starts with creating a culture of integrity within organizations,
Okay.
making sure that conversations are honest, actions are aligned with commitments, and there's a genuine willingness to address and resolve issues.
So it's about transparency, accountability, and ethical behavior.
Right. And it requires leaders who are willing to let go of control and empower others to participate in shaping the future.
Well, this has been a fascinating discussion, and I feel like we've really uncovered some profound insights about the power of performance. So as promised, I want to offer our listeners a quick recap, a 10-point summary of the key takeaways.
Sounds good.
Okay, so first, how we perceive situations has a huge impact on how we perform.
Right. And second, we have to be aware of the hidden assumptions and language patterns that might be limiting us.
Okay, third, the default future isn't set in stone. We have the power to rewrite it using what they call generative language.
And fourth, when we declare a new future with commitment, it can actually shift our reality and inspire action.
Fifth, addressing and resolving past issues can open up new possibilities.
Sixth, integrity and honoring our commitments are essential for progress and workability.
Seventh, the leaders have a say in how situations occur, not just for themselves, but for others.
Eighth, organizations can become self-led by aligning their conversations around a shared future.
Okay. Ninth, mastering any discipline involves building a new way of seeing the world, what they call a new deterministic screen.
And finally, the most effective leaders break free from the limited personas they've created in the past and embrace their full potential.
Wow, that's a lot to take in. But I think it gives us a really solid foundation for understanding the three laws of performance. So I encourage you to really think about these ideas and see how you can apply them in your own life. And until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep rewriting your future.